Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to our class for today. We're going to be reviewing the as-is purchase contract and all of the disclosures and addendums, any supporting documents that we use when we are purchasing a property or representing a buyer. We're going to be covering in today's class. If you have any questions, as always, please unmute yourselves to ask questions. This is meant to be an interactive class. We're going to respond to all of your questions. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. I am logged into Form Simplicity, which is where we find all of our documents. I am going to show you where everything is located, and then we're going to go through an entire review of each document. All right. So if you don't know how to access Form Simplicity, it's quite simple from your Miami Realtors resource panel. It is one of your programs in here, and you'll see it right here. I actually have it identified as one of my favorites. This is why you see it up here in my favorites tab. So if you haven't organized your favorites tab, this is a excellent way for you to have all of the services that you use frequently in your favorites tab. So as you can see, I have Matrix, which is the MLS, Form Simplicity, which is where we find all of our contracts. And then we have IMAP, RPR, Agent 3000, Showing Time. These are all of my selected favorite items from this entire page. And I pretty much have them up here. All right, so Form Simplicity is right here. We're going to go ahead and click there. And that gets us into the actual program itself. All right, so today we're going to review the as-is purchase contract. This is the form that we will use to prepare an offer to present to purchase a property. All right, so we're going to go through the entire form, page by page, making sure that you guys understand the as-is contract. And where can you find the as-is contract? Very simple. Just go to blank forms. And inside of the Florida Realtor Library, it is in alphabetical order. And if you just scroll down just a little bit, you'll find the as-is purchase contract right here. It is the as-is residential contract for sale and purchase. It is the most commonly used purchase contract for any residential property. All right, there is a purchase contract for a commercial property, which is a commercial contract. So if you are purchasing a commercial property, perhaps you should use the commercial purchase contract. But for today, it is the as is. Also, I want to remind you that you can find the as is contract inside of your forms packages by clicking on forms packages and then clicking on the buyer package. And right here, you will be able to see the as is contract right here. Okay. So you can access the as is contract from inside of our package, or you can go straight to the forms library inside of blank forms and you will be able to find the as is contracts. Okay. So let's go ahead and click on it and let's review. Okay. So when we are representing a buyer, we are going to be preparing the as is contracts. Okay. So as you can see here, it is a how many pages? You're going to see here real quick. It is a 13-page form. All right, so the as-is contract is 13 pages. So let's go ahead and go from the top all the way to the bottom. All right, so page one of the as-is contract, line one. This is where you put in and you fill in the seller's name. All right, so you're going to look up public record and you're going to see who owns the property and you're going to plug in the seller's name. Line two is for your buyer's name. All right, so whoever your buyer is, if it's multiple buyers, put in the multiple names. Then we go here to paragraph one, property description. You're going to fill in the property address. You're going to fill in the folio number, which is the parcel ID number. And you're going to also fill in the entire legal description. Now, I am going to show you how to fill in all of this shortly. Actually, let's just jump right into it and let's show you. All right, so now you know where the form is located, all right? So I don't want to repeat myself, so let's go ahead and prepare an as-is contract, and we will be reviewing the entire contract as we prepare one for a purchase, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and just close out of this. And let's go to Matrix real quick. This is the MLS, and we're gonna go and find the property to place an offer on. All right. So if you guys give me 1 second here, let me locate a property. And we're gonna go ahead and place an offer on this property. So we always place an offer on a property inside of the MLS by clicking on the Form Simplicity logo right here. So whether you're representing a buyer or a tenant, you always begin your offer process by clicking on FS, Form Simplicity. That's gonna go ahead and launch Form Simplicity the same way. However, it's going to auto-populate all the information. So you see, I didn't want to like do this twice. So now we are plugging in the property address and everything else. Okay. So we do need to fill in the seller's name. So in order for us to get the seller's name, we're going to go here to the MLS and we're going to click on IMAP. IMAP is this little symbol right next to Form Simplicity. We're going to go ahead and open it and we're going to find the seller's name. All right. So give me 1 second here. And we have our seller's name, our sellers. Okay. So I'm just going to go with Susanna and Hector. All right. I'm not going to put in their last names. I'm just going to, you should, right? But I'm just, it's class only, right? We're only doing a training. So I'm going to go with Susanna and Hector. Okay. And that's going to go ahead and auto populate onto the actual contract itself. And then down here, we're gonna put in the purchase price. So this is listed for 625. We're gonna go ahead and offer 615. All right, let's offer $615,000. And then your buyer's name, I'm gonna go with Michael Jordan. And then we're gonna go ahead and click on save to a transaction. Name the transaction the same as the property address. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put in here Michael Jordan for my buyer. And then the property type is residential and the transaction type is purchase. All right. Click on save to a new transaction. All right. So my next step is to add the forms. Let's go ahead and click on add forms from the package and let's click on a buyer package and let's go ahead and remove all the forms and let's add the as is contract for now. All right, let's add the as is contract for now. Let's click on add to a transaction and continue. And now we're ready to open the as is contract and begin reviewing it. So here it is. Let's open it. All right, so as we were reviewing prior to me creating a transaction, when I had a blank form, we were reviewing that line one is for your seller's names, line two is for your buyer's names, and then right here in paragraph number one, we have the property address. We have the folio number, which is the parcel ID number. We also have the legal description. This was auto populated directly from the MLS. So you see why we do what we did rather than plugging in all the information manually. You just want to go ahead and bring it in over from the MLS listing itself. All right. So now letter D, personal property. All right, so any personal property that is going to be included in the sale, not things that are attached to the home, right? So let's say, for example, there's custom built-ins. That is part of the property itself. Now, personal property is appliances, right? Furniture, maybe a jacuzzi, right? A spa. Anything that is a personal property that is included in the sale, you're going to place it here in this line that you see here. And then letter E is the following items are excluded from the purchase. Let's say, for example, you are selling, or sorry, you are buying a home that's on the water, and the owner has a few jet skis sitting on the water there. All right, the jet skis are personal property, and it is not going to be included in the sale, then you're going to write over here jet ski. All right, so anything that's not, any personal property that's not included, and you're going to write it there in line E. All right, number two, this is your purchase price. So on the right, you are going to write in the purchase price what your client is offering for the property. Okay. Right below that, you have the section for the deposit. All right. So this would be letter A under paragraph number two. So this is your initial deposit. Let's say you're going to come in with $10,000, right? $10,000 is your initial deposit. Now, if you keep on reading, it says the initial deposit is to be made within 3 days. All right. If you leave it blank, it does default to 3 days. So our initial deposit is to be made within 3 days. And then right here, you're going to fill in the details of the title company that you are going to choose to represent your buyer. So we have our own title company that we use is our preferred title called Marina Title, right? And if you guys need more information on Marina Title, please contact me and I will give you all of their information. So as you can see here, I am filling in the information for Marina Title. Okay. Now, if your buyer has a preferred attorney or a preferred title company, then and you want to use them, you're gonna go ahead and put in here. Who collects the escrow? Marina Title, in this case, will collect the escrow, and the escrow of $10,000 needs to be collected within the first 3 days after the effective date. All right, letter B under paragraph number two is for additional deposit. So if an additional deposit is going to be made, then decide when it's going to be made. So as a default, we've gone ahead and plugged in 12 days. All right, if you leave it blank, it's going to default to 10 days. So let's say my buyer is going to put in an additional deposit of $10,000. So now we're looking at a total of $20,000 in deposit held in escrow by Marina Title. That additional deposit is not necessary. If you put in a substantial amount for an initial deposit, then the additional deposit could be zero, right? So it is not necessary. However, for today's case, I'm going to go ahead and put in an initial deposit of 10,000 and an additional deposit of 10,000 due within 12 days. The reason we put 12 days is because in most cases, we're going to set our inspection period to 10 days. So we want to be able to submit the secondary deposit or the additional deposit after the inspection period is complete. All right, so that's why we put in 12 days here. All right, line number 39 of the as-is contract. This is financing expressed as a dollar amount or percentage, the loan amount. So right here where there is a percentage, you're going to put in the amount that the uh, buyer is going to take out a loan. So let's say that this is an FHA loan and they're going to come in with the minimum 3.5% down payment. So that means that they're going to finance 96.5%. So you're going to put in here 96.5% and the additional money due at closing now is $1,525. So 10,000 plus 10,000 plus 1,525 is equivalent to 3.5% of $615,000. All right. So, question on the chat, how do you determine the initial deposit? It's really whatever you think is fair. So, if you are buying a $615,000 property, you're probably not going to get away with an initial deposit of $5,000, like a total deposit of 5,000. You're probably going to want to put in $10,000. If you're buying a $300,000 property, maybe a $5,000 deposit will be sufficient. right? If you're buying a $400,000 property, maybe even a $500,000 deposit, sorry, $500,000 property, maybe a $5,000 deposit will be sufficient. In this case, since I'm doing a class, I went ahead and I put 10,000 here and another 10,000 here. So I guess my answer to your question is um, maybe 1.5% of your purchase price. Maybe you want to have a deposit of 1.5%, maybe 2%. No more than that. No more than that. All right. Remember, the deposit is what is at risk, right? I mean, whenever you enter into a contract and you're putting money up front, although the buyer has a lot of protection throughout the entire process, that deposit is held in escrow and it is liable. So don't put in $50,000, right? Put something like this, 10,000 and that's it. All right. All right. So the percentage, once again, this is the amount financed. If the buyer is going to finance, let's say 90%, then you come over here and you change it to 90%. If the buyer's going to finance 80%, then once again, you're going to change this to 80%. So if I did that, right? If I come here and I say 90% financing, then the total due at closing now jumps to $41,500. 41,500. So if I come back over here and I do, no, we're gonna finance 95%, and then that total comes down to $10,750 due at closing. And if I come here and I do 96.5%, and now we're looking at $1,525. All right, $1,525. All right, so what is my down payment in this case? It's $21,525 is my total down payment. That is 3.5% of $615,000. All right. So line 43, paragraph 3, line 43, time for acceptance. So when you submit an offer, you don't want to sit around and wait a week for a decision. You want to make this as urgent as possible. So that if today is Tuesday, I would like a response no later than Friday. All right, I would like a response no later than November 14th. That's 3 days, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. All right. Now, you don't have to go 3 days. You can put in 5 days or you can put in one day, right? So this is the expiration date of your offer, time for acceptance. Can it be extended? Yes. If for some reason the seller decides to accept your offer on Saturday and your buyer still wants the property, then we can make a change to the time for acceptance, make it where it reflects Saturday, and we can move forward. Okay. So it's not the end all be all. However, it's a great way for the buyer to say, all right, we reached November 14th. You have not accepted my offer. I am free to now go offer on another property. You see, your buyer cannot submit multiple offers. I mean, they can, but you shouldn't, right? Multiple offers, because what happens if multiple offers get accepted? Now you're under contract with multiple properties. So this is why you want to put in a few days for acceptance. And if it doesn't get accepted, then you move on to the next property. Okay. Closing date. Closing date, again, when do you like to close? You can go with a calendar date. Let's say we want to close by um, December 30th. Let's say you want to close by December 30th. You select a calendar date, or you can write. You can write on or before 45 days. Okay. That is your closing date. And then it has here occupancy and possession, right? Check if the property is subject to lease. Very important. If the property is currently leased, right? If the property is currently leased, then you want to make sure that this is checked. Check if property is subject to lease. If property is subject to a lease or occupancy agreements, including seasonal and short-term vacation rentals after the closing, right? This must be checked. Assignability, this is number seven. All right. Can this contract be assigned? So there is a few options here. Buyer may assign and thereby be released from any further liability under this contract. Probably never going to be checked, right? I mean, it's not going to be checked. What you may see in most contracts are that the buyer, all right, may assign but not be released from liability under this contract. So, wholesalers that are submitting offers and they're reassigning the contract to someone else, all right, they're in this case, they're not going to be released from liability from this contract. Okay. And then the third option is may not assign this contract. So if a seller's like, I'll accept your offer, but you can't really assign this contract to someone else, then you may have a seller negotiate where option number three is checked. Otherwise, in most cases, you will see may assign the contract, but not be released from liability under this contract. Number eight talks about financing. Check letter A if this is a cash transaction. Check B if this is financing. So in today's case, we're going to go ahead and go with B. And then it says this contract is contingent upon within 30 days. And if you leave it in blank, it's going to result to 30 days. 30 days after the effective date, loan approval period. So your loan approval must be in within the first 30 days after the effective date. If you are approaching the 30-day mark and you still do not have a loan approval and you still want to proceed with the purchase, then you may have to get an extension of that loan approval period. If within 30 days there is no loan approval and your buyer wishes to back out for whatever reason, or maybe the loan is not going to be approved, it's going to be denied, then the lender will have to submit a denial letter and then you guys can cancel the contract, right? And in that case, your buyer will get their deposit returned in full, okay? If there is a denial letter. All right, so within 30 days, we must have an approval. This is going to be an FHA loan. You can check conventional, FHA, VA, or other. All right, our buyer is going to be taking out a 30-year loan. So that's your term. If they're going to take out a 15-year, then put in a 15-year. And then right over here, we have 5-day loan application period. So your buyer shall make an application for financing within 5 days after the effective date. So if I submit the offer today and it gets signed today, today is the effective date, November 11th. Starting tomorrow, we have 5 days where the buyer must apply for financing. All right, 5 days after the effective date. So if the effective date is today, then tomorrow would be day one, day two, day three, day four, day five. All right, we must get a loan application in. This is why it's extremely important that we work with buyers that are pre-approved. Like this, they just go right to the lender that pre-approved them and submit a loan application. All right. Any questions on financing? We're all good? Perfect. All right, guys, moving on to the next couple of pages are pretty standard. If you use our package, you'll see that all of these are pretty standard, but here we have closing costs, fees, and charges. All right, if the property is located in Miami-Dade or Broward County, the buyer shall choose the closing agent and pay for all owner's title policy. Never have your seller demand to choose their own title company, because if that's the case, if you are in a transaction where you represent the seller and the seller wants to choose the title company where the buyer is going to use that title company, then the seller pays for the title policy, and that could be expensive. So in Miami-Dade and Broward County, buyer shall designate the closing agent. Therefore, buyer pays for the title policy, right? The title insurance. All right. Now, right here, if the property is located outside of Miami-Dade and Broward County, then you're going to go ahead and choose option one or two. All right. Buyer shall designate the closing agent and pay for owner's title policy. Okay. And that would be if it's in Palm Beach or Lee County or anywhere outside of Miami-Dade and Broward, it would be option number two. Option number one, okay, is seller shall designate the closing agent. So the seller chooses the closing agent, and the seller is going to pay for the title insurance, owner's policy, and charges. You're not gonna see that. All right, you're not gonna see that much. It's either gonna be option number two, and if performing the transaction in Miami-Dade and Broward, option number three. All right, letter D here talks about survey. The survey is going to be ordered. It should be performed within 5 days prior to the closing date. The title company, in this case, Marina Title, will be in charge of scheduling a survey to go out and be performed. The survey will be charged to the buyer at closing. It'll be part of their closing costs. All right, special assessments right here, letter F. At closing, seller shall pay in full the amount of liens imposed by the public body. What is the public body? It's the city. All right. This special assessment is not to be confused with special assessments in the association. This is public body. So seller shall pay in full prior to or at the closing any assessments allowed by the public body to be prepaid. For any assessments which the public body does not allow prepayment, option A shall be deemed selected for such assessments. So if the city or county has assessed the property because of improvements to the sidewalk and the street and the curb and everything else, the public body, then seller shall pay in installments due prior to closing, and then the buyer shall pay installments after closing. But the idea is to have the seller pay it in full prior to the closing because the assessment was incurred prior to the closing. So we should have the seller pay for it. All right, but if the agreement is that the seller is going to pay monthly installments up until closing and then the buyer will take care of the rest, then you would choose letter A. Okay. All right, guys. So right here, talks about radon gas, permits and disclosures, mold, flood zone, energy brochure, lead-based paint disclosure. We'll talk about that a little later. We have HOA disclosures, so HOA community disclosures. Again, we'll talk about that later. The seller's disclosure, once again, we'll talk about that later. All right, then we move into the all-important number 12. This is the property inspection right to cancel. So let's go ahead and read through it. Property inspections and right to cancel. Buyer shall have, in this case, we put in 10 days. If you leave it in blank, it defaults to 15 days. If you want to make it shorter than 10, maybe you want to make it 7 days, then you're going to go ahead and put in 7 days. So buyer shall have 10 days after the effective date, so beginning the day after the contract becomes effective, within which to have such inspections of the property performed as buyer shall desire during the inspection period. If the buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the property is not acceptable to the buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice of such election to the seller prior to the expiration of the inspection period. So the buyer can cancel the contract without any reasoning. within these 10 days and completely back out and get their deposit returned. Okay? Now, during these 10 days, the buyer is going to order an inspection and it's going to be completely paid by the buyer out of pocket. All right. Buyer shall be responsible for prompt payment for such inspections for repairs of damage to and restoration of the property resulting from such inspections. All right. Now, guys, during this inspection period, let's say today we're under contract. Tomorrow I should be ordering an inspection on the property, right? You should order an inspection right away. You want to know if there are issues with the property where a lower price needs to be negotiated or credits to your buyer needs to be negotiated. And if you guys cannot come to terms with the seller, then within these 10 days, you need to decide whether you're going to move forward as is or if you're going to cancel the contract. So, this is why it's extremely important that you give yourself some time by putting 10 days here and also jumping into action right away, scheduling an inspection and having an inspection performed on the property. Okay? Any questions on the inspection period? All right, it's very important. No questions? You guys are awesome. All right, walkthrough inspection. So the walkthrough inspection usually happens on the day of the closing or maybe the evening before the closing. It is one final walkthrough of the property, making sure that everything is in place, that there's nothing missing from the last time the buyer saw the property to the day that they're going to close on the property, right? So let's say, for instance, when the buyer last saw the property, there was a refrigerator. And they go to the walkthrough inspection, and the refrigerator is now missing. All right, that is a major issue, and it could prolong the closing. It could halt the closing until the refrigerator is replaced. Now, at that point in time, if you don't want to prolong the closing, you can create an addendum, right? That says seller is to replace the refrigerator within 1 day of the closing, all right? Or within or after, within 1 day after the closing. So you can you can do the walkthrough inspection. You can say, all right, there's something missing. There's a few items missing. The seller must replace these items in order to close, or at least 1 day after the closing. All right.
Robert, a question.
Yes.
In case that is no missing, what happened is the seller changed the refrigerator for other. What happened? And is other mark is not a good one. What happened in this case?
For a brand new refrigerator?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, suppose.
Oof. So I don't think that's gonna happen unless during the inspection of the property there was a non-working refrigerator
Well,
and they went ahead and bought a refrigerator. I mean, in that case, it's up to the seller's discretion what refrigerator they're gonna buy. You know,
yep. But maybe we're talking about the refrigerator, but not the mark, not the
yeah,
this
no, yeah.
new order. So that's it, the question.
That
So
the buyer is paying for the property as is, as long as there's
okay.
a working refrigerator, and if the agreement was that the seller's to replace the refrigerator with a brand new, there's no, like the buyer can't demand, hey, I want top of the line
Yeah.
Samsung refrigerator.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. The walkthrough inspection is important in a purchase, just like it is in a rental. All right. If you're about to acquire property on a rental, that walkthrough inspection is going to tell you, hey, listen, there are things damaged with the property that were here before I took control of the property. And I want to make sure that it is documented because at the end of the lease, I don't want to be held liable for the things that are damaged. And if there are things damaged that need to be replaced, then the landlord during the walkthrough inspection will agree to replace those things. So it's the same thing on a walkthrough inspection on a purchase. The seller is to close out all building permits. All right, you're gonna see that later on in the contract, but the seller is to close out all building permits. All right, then the contract talks about escrow agents. Who's the escrow agent? In this case, it's Marina Title. All right. Default and dispute resolution. You guys need to learn, read through this. Buyer default, seller default, and what happens. Dispute resolutions, attorney fees and costs. All right. Title evidence, title examination. All right. We have closing location, documents and procedures, closing documents, escrow closing procedures. All of this is part of the contract. I invite you guys to read through it. Obviously, we're not going to read through it because there's just so much that we cover in a class like this today. I'm pretty much going over the most important parts. All right, so we land on this page. This is page number 11. All right, so here we're going to identify what other disclosures or addendums are going to be included with our contract. So if this property was built in 1978 or prior to 1978, then we need a lead-based paint disclosure. I am almost certain this property was built before 1978, but let's check. This property was built in 1939. So yes, we need a lead-based paint disclosure. If this property were inside of a an association, a homeowners association, then you would need the HOA community disclosure. All right, so it's the association right here, homeowners association. You would check that. Okay, if this property was subject to appraisal, then you would need the appraisal contingency. Now, in an FHA loan, it's going to be appraised no matter what. All right. So you're going to select FHA financing instead. You don't have to do the appraisal contingency. All right. So if you submit an offer for 615 and this is an FHA and the lender goes and does an appraisal and it appraises at 585, then your buyer, all right, they can essentially move away from this purchase and receive their deposit back because it did not appraise. It did not appraise at 615. All right. Or we can negotiate to have that price lowered to 585, or we can negotiate to meet halfway. Maybe the buyer is willing to come out of pocket 10,000, right? And make the new purchase price 595. Okay, so FHA financing, this is an FHA deal, so I'm going to go ahead and select FHA. If it is not an FHA, if it is a conventional loan, but you are going to do an appraisal contingency, then you will select letter F, appraisal contingency. Okay, moving on over here to the right-hand side, you are going to include the compensation agreement, which is what guarantees that you will be compensated. And then seller's property disclosure will be given to you by the seller and the flood disclosure as well. All right, these are the items that we will check. Okay. And then page number 12, right? Page number 12 is the additional terms. Within the additional terms, you will see the transaction broker fee charged by Elite Ocean View Realty, paid by the buyer at closing. And then you see here, seller shall close any open or expired permits or code violations against the subject property at seller's sole costs prior to closing. This provision shall supersede paragraph 12C of the contract. quickly move up here to 12C. All right. And this is pretty much why I skipped it. All right. So you see right here, this is 12. And then C, seller assistance and cooperation in closing all building permits. So this paragraph is part of the contract. But what we wrote down here, all right, this term supersedes that paragraph. We want the seller to close out any any open permits or code violations prior, all right, to closing. They don't have to pay the violation before you get to closing. They just have to agree that we're going to, uh, take care of the violation at closing. It's going to come out of their proceeds. All right, guys, that's it. This is your contract. We're going to go ahead and save it. All right, and that is your as is contract. You're going to prepare that to place an offer. All right. So what other documents did we say we were going to need? So for that, we're just going to come over here to where it says add blank forms. And we are going to need the flood. All right. So we're going to go ahead and spell flood right over here. And we need the flood disclosure. All right. So the flood disclosure is right here. You're going to go ahead and select it and add it to the transaction. We're going to go ahead and click on add blank forms. And we also need the FHA financing. All right. So FHA financing right here. All right. CR7 FHA VA. This is the Florida Bar or Realtors, Florida Realtors, Florida Bar contract and addendum. We select that one and we add it as well. And one more, we're going to go ahead and add from the packages. Let's go to the packages. Let's open up the buyer package, and you don't need all of this. We are going to add the compensation agreement sellers to buyer broker. Compensation agreement sellers to buyer broker. We're going to add that one to our transaction. All right, we're going to save it. Now we have the compensation agreement as well. Okay. So how do you fill out the compensation agreement? You're going to go ahead and open it. You spoke to the seller, and the seller agent says the seller is going to compensate you 2.5%, and you being the buyer broker. So we have here Elite Ocean View Realty is the buyer's broker. The sellers are Susanna and Hector. The address of the property. And again, the seller broker in this case was also the Ocean View Realty. I chose one of our listings, but this would be the name of the brokerage that represents the seller. All right. For a term of 45 days, we're going to go ahead and prepare a compensation agreement where the seller has agreed to compensate you, the buyer agent, 2.5%. So they communicate that with you. You're going to go ahead and put in 2.5%, save it, sign it, and send it over to the listing agent. All right. Save it, sign it. And where do you sign it? You sign it right here where it says broker or authorized associate. You will sign it, you will date it, and then this is going to be sent over to the seller with the offer because the seller also needs to agree and sign this. Okay. Close that out. The flood disclosure, let's open it here real quick. This is very simple. A flood disclosure will probably be sent to you. Now, I wanted to show it to you, but you're not going to prepare the flood disclosure. The flood disclosure, the seller's going to prepare and they're going to send it to you. They're going to answer these questions. Seller has or has no knowledge of any flooding that has damaged the property. Usually, if there are no signs of flood damage and there's no knowledge of flood damage, they're going to go and check the second option. Line two, seller has or has not filed a claim with an insurance provider relating to flood damage on the property. All right. So there, if they've never filed a claim against an insurance carrier for flood damage, then they're going to check option number two. Line three, seller has or has not received assistance for flood damage to the property. All right. Have they received assistance from Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA? All right. Once again, they're going to choose that they have not received any flood damage if the answers have been that there's no knowledge and they've never filed a claim. All right, now if they have filed a claim and they have received damage, then you're probably going to see option one checked all the way down the line. All right. All right, guys, so this is your flood disclosure. Once again, your buyer does not have to sign this, but the seller must send it to you and it needs to be signed by the seller. All right. The title company representing your buyer will ask for this. All right. It is part of the contract. They will ask for it. So make sure that you receive a copy of a flood disclosure from the seller's agent, right? The listing agent. Another document you're going to receive from the listing agent is the seller's disclosure. So I'm going to go ahead and open up here the blank forms and let's search for it. I'm just going to go ahead and put in here seller. We're going to search and it's going to be the seller's disclosure for a single family home, right? Residential for a single family home. I'm going to go ahead and select it and then click on add to a transaction. Now, as the buyer agent or buyer, you are not going to prepare this whatsoever. This is going to be the listing agent and the seller who prepares and then delivers a seller's property disclosure. All right, so this is what it looks like. It's basically a questionnaire. All right. So when a seller gets ready to sell their property, they need to deliver this questionnaire. Now, the agent cannot help the seller prepare this form, right? The agent will then deliver this form to the seller, and the seller will then answer yes, no, or I don't know for all of these questions, right? Notice how I cannot, in Form Simplicity, mark any of these items. I need to deliver this form to my seller and they need to mark these items. So it goes through structures, systems, and appliances. And let me just read a few of these. Are the structures including roof, ceiling, walls, doors, windows, foundation, and pool, hot tub, and spa? Are they structurally sound and free of any leaks? The answer would obviously be yes if there's no issues with the property. All right, and then it just goes down here talking about termites, water intrusion, plumbing, roof and roof related items, pool, hot tubs and spas, sinkholes, HOA restrictions, boundaries and access roads, environmental, government claims and litigation, and foreign investment in real property tax act. So, FIRPTA. All right. They're going to answer yes, no, or I don't know. They are going to sign this, print their name, and date it. And then the buyer is going to receive the seller's disclosure and they're going to review it. They're going to sign, print their name, and date it. And then this also gets recorded with the title company. All right. This is a very important piece, guys. This is the seller disclosing to the buyer of any known issues with the property. All right. So let's go ahead and make sure that we receive one of these when we're representing a buyer and that we have a completed file. What are other forms you may use? Of course, you're probably going to need an addendum at some point. So you can always go here to blank addendum, or sorry, blank forms, and you can choose an addendum to a contract, this one right here. All right, you may need addendums to extend closing dates, loan approval periods, maybe add a seller credit to the buyer. So an addendum to a contract. When you open it, you'll see that it is a blank addendum where you're going to place the number of addendum. So this would be addendum number one with an effective date of, let's say, today, right? November 11th. And then anything that you want to disclose on the addendum, you're going to write it down here. It is known as a blank addendum. So something that you would write is one, and then I'm going to go seller to credit buyer with $10,000 at closing for repairs. You don't have to say for repairs, but if the $10,000 is for repairs, right? Because there was $10,000 worth of repairs in the inspection, then write it. And then always close out your addendum like this. All other terms and conditions, all other terms and conditions of this contract remain the same. Close it out that way and basically have your buyer and seller sign it. This is how you would prepare an addendum. You don't go to the initial contract to make changes to the additional terms. Just go ahead and create an addendum and add to the existing contract, right? You add the credit, okay? You change the closing date with an addendum. You change the inspection period with an addendum. You change the loan approval period with an addendum. Okay. You don't go to the initial contract that's already been executed and change it there. I mean, you can, but it'll just be messy, right? Just do an addendum. It's easier. All right. And then the last form I'm going to show you, and let's hope that you guys never need this, is the cancellation of the contract. All right. So in the event that you have to cancel the contract, you need to back out, then you're going to need a cancellation form. So you're going to go here to where it says blank forms, and you're going to spell the word over here, release. Spell the word release. Or cancellation. I mean, you can spell cancellation. Release and cancellation of the contract. All right, let's go ahead and open that up and show it to you. Let's add to the transaction. Let's open up the release and cancellation of the contract for sale and purchase. And once again, it is going to include the buyer's name, the seller's name, and then you are canceling the as is residential contract for sale and purchase with the effective date of November 11th, right? And then the brokerages. All right. So who are the brokerages? In this case, it was Elite Ocean View Realty times two because the listing agent works with Elite Ocean View Realty and I am the buyer's agent and I also work for Elite Ocean View Realty. And then the total amount of $20,000, all right, is due to Michael Jordan. Okay. So request a cancellation like this, have the buyer sign it, and then let's send it over to the seller's agent so they can have the seller sign it. Obviously, there needs to be a reason after the inspection period why you are canceling. Okay, so before the inspection period, is over, you can send one of these, no questions asked. The seller needs to sign it, and we have a canceled transaction. But after those 10-day inspection period, and let's say an appraisal goes through, and the appraised value is too low, and we cannot come to any agreeable terms on how to move forward with the transaction, then since it did not appraise and it is an FHA loan and the lender will not provide a loan for that property, you're going to get the denial letter, right? And you're going to also see that the appraisal did not appraise. And with that reasoning alone, you're able to cancel out. Okay. Um, Submitting one of these without reason, right? Without reason is not going to get your buyers the money back. If your buyer has a last minute change of mind, last minute change of heart, and they pull away and they're absolutely okay with losing their deposit, then even if you submit one of these, it's not going to be granted. The seller's going to want to keep the deposit. All right. There has been instances, and it's confusing to me, but there has been instances where the buyer backs out the day of the closing and they walk away from their $20,000. All right, for the life of me, I don't understand why, but I guess it's better to lose $20,000 than to buy a mistake. In their eyes, they think it's a mistake. So then why go through the entire process of buying the property? But anyways, this is a release and cancellation of the contract. It is necessary to have buyer and seller sign it, send it over to the title company so the title company can refund the buyer the deposit and close out the file. All right. Guys, any questions and anything that we covered today? Anything that we covered today? We covered the as-is contracts. We covered pretty much all the supporting documents. Obviously, there are supporting documents for a condo. There are supporting documents for an HOA. But in today's, review, we pretty much went over purchasing a single family home outside of an HOA. All right, so we didn't use the HOA community disclosure. But if you need it, it's simple. Just go to the packages. I mean, we have it here in the packages. Go to the buyer package, and it's going to be this HOA community disclosure. And also for a condo, it'll be the condo rider. You know what we didn't add before? The lead-based paint disclosure. My bad. So let's go ahead and add that one as well. All right. So we did add the HOA community disclosure. If this property is inside of an HOA, you're gonna have this filled out. If this property is part of a condo, you're gonna have the condominium rider filled out. What we did forget to add, and we should have added, is the lead-based paint disclosure. This property was built in 1935, therefore we need one of these. It is required. The title company will ask for one. All right, we're gonna need the buyers to initial and the sellers to initial. And basically here you're gonna see where the seller is probably gonna say seller has no knowledge of any lead-based paint hazards, and seller has no reports or recordings pertaining to the lead-based paint. So basically the seller is gonna say, I don't know anything. They're gonna initial letter A and letter B. Buyer's going to go ahead and initial here. Buyer has received copies of all information listed above. Buyer has received the pamphlet that says protect your family from lead in your home. And they're going to also initial letter E, where it says buyer has received a 10-day opportunity, um, you know, to inspect the property. The licensee, usually it's the listing agent who's going to initial here. And then we have the sellers to sign, the buyers to sign, the listing agent to sign, and you, the buyer agent, will sign the lead-based paint disclosure. Again, this is only for properties built on 1978 or prior to 1978. Okay. All right. Now we're truly finished with the class, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know before we wrap it up. All right.
I have a quick question, Robert.
Yes.
So if the buyer walks away from that contract and loses the money, the deposit, how does it work with regards to the compensation to the seller's agent?
So that money belongs to the seller unless in the listing agreement, when the seller, met with the listing agent, and the listing agent in the listing agreement negotiated where a percentage of that escrow belongs to them. There is a section on the exclusive right to sell listing agreement where it says if there is escrow and that escrow money is awarded to the seller because the buyer walked away, then a percentage of that can go to the brokerage. As a buyer agent, if your buyer walks away, you guys are paid a zero. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
thank you. Yes, it does make sense. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this $20,000 in this case belongs to the seller. The seller is the one that had their property off the market for 30 days, 45 days, and they made arrangements to sell the property and they made arrangements to move to another home. And all of a sudden, the buyer decides not to proceed, that money is going to be awarded to the seller.
Okay.
All right, Donna, Adolfo, Crystal, Gianna, Grace, any questions?
So
No
yeah,
questions, Robert.
I have a question. Could we
Sure.
have those examples that you work today?
Do we have
Contract. Yeah.
like the video?
No, just the contract that you fill out today that you show as example.
I
So
can
have this
I
contract to study in order
I
to
can
follow.
I can send you one.
Okay, good.
All right, I can send you one. If anybody else wants a template on how to fill these documents out, let me know. I'll send them to you.
Can you send it to me, Robert, please? Thank you.
Also to Donna, Robert, please.
All right,
Thank you.
guys. So let's do something. Give me 1 second. All right, now that I have you all here, all right, let me just go to my documents. All right, I'm gonna go to my documents here real quick, and I'm gonna upload it so you guys can download it here. Okay, 1 second. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed our class. It was a fun class. We went ahead and reviewed all the documentation. So now it's time for us to go help our buyers buy their dream home. All right, so if you have any questions, you know how to reach me. And thank you so much for today. And we'll see you guys on Thursday at 10 a.m.
Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Have a great day, everyone.